cognitive learning theory. As an introduction to cognitivism, cognitivism is a learning theory that focuses on the inner mental activities. Opening the black box of the human mind is valuable and necessary for understanding how people learn. It emphasizes the role of mental processes in learning.
So some historical background. It was developed in the mid 20th century as a response to behaviorism. Um, One of those key pathfinders was Jean Piaget, probably butchered that. Developed stages of cognitive development, focusing on how children construct knowledge. Another one of those key figures was Jerome Bruner, who promoted discovery learning and the importance of categorization. He also introduced the spiral curriculum. And then there's also Ulrich Neisser, the father of cognitive psychology. And in his 1967 book, Cognitive Psychology, he defined the field.
We have cognitivism versus behaviorism. Cognitivism it focuses on mental processes and knowledge construction, whereas behaviorism focuses on observable behaviors and external stimuli. In comparison, both theories aim to explain how learning occurs and how behavior or knowledge can be acquired and change over time.
So some of the key concepts of cognitivism. First one is the schema theory, which is a mental framework that helps organize and interpret information. In addition to that, we have information processing model, which describes how information is received, processed, stored, and retrieved by the mind. And then lastly, we have constructivism, which is the idea that learners construct their own understanding and knowledge of the world through experiences and reflecting upon those experiences.
Some strengths and criticisms of cognitism. So on the left of the screen, those are the strengths, and on the right are the criticisms. So to go over those strengths, it's focus on mental processes, helps understand how knowledge is acquired. Role of the learner encourages engagement and critical thinking, and flexibility can be applied to various educational concepts and subjects. And the criticisms are overemphasis on mental processes. These may neglect the role of emotions and social factors in learning, and complexity. Cognitive processes can be difficult to measure and observe directly.
So the application directly within education. First off, in structural design, structures the content to align with how the human mind processes information. Additionally, the use of technology, tools like multimedia presentations, simulations, and educational softwares. And then lastly, collaborative learning, such as group activities that promote interaction and discussion.
Some cognitive learning strategies would be active learning. This engaging with the materials through questioning, summarizing, and discussing. Scaffolding, which is providing temporary support to help learners achieve a task, and problem solving, encouraging learners to find solutions to complex issues.
So the cognitive processes, oops. Oh no. There we go. So the cognitive processes, attention, which is focusing on certain stimuli while ignoring others, perception, which is interpreting sensory information, memory, which is encoding, storing, and retrieving information, and lastly, metacognition, which is thinking about one's own thinking processes.
In conclusion, the summary of cognitivism provides valuable insights into how people learn by focusing on mental processes, and the importance is understanding cognitivism. It can enhance teaching strategies and improve educational outcomes. And then, sorry, I totally went over you.
Sorry. So here are a list of our references. Thank you for listening.
Awesome. Do you want to go ahead and share your screen of our lesson plan now?
Yeah. Yes, can you see it?
Yep.
Awesome. Let me zoom it in a little.
Okay.
Where is it?
I can see it okay.
You can? Okay. As long as you can see it, that works.
Yep. Alrighty,
Awesome.
so we have our lesson plan is going to be a science lesson plan. We don't really have a full lesson set out for it just because to work in our cognitive language acquisition theory was kind of difficult, but our standard is to develop a model and just describe movement of matter among planets or plants, animals, decomposers, and the environment. The student's objective would be to understand the components and processes of the water cycle, organize and represent knowledge through the creation of a concept map, and apply cognitive learning strategies to deepen understanding and retention. And they will be able to show their mastery of the water cycle by including accuracy, organization, and depth of the student's concept math by demonstrating their understanding with key processes and components. Group presentations should reflect clear explanations and engagement, while participation in class discussions indicate critical thinking and the ability to analyze information. Individual reflections should reveal insights and self-assessments of learning. Observation during formal assessments should show active participation and effective application of cognitive strategies. Finally, completed concept maps and reflection journals will be evaluated for overall understanding and the ability to make meaningful connections. The materials that students will need are a large sheet of paper or a digital concept mapping tools. So they could use things like MindMeister or Lucidchart. So they will need Chromebooks, iPads, whatever technology that schools have to provide for those. If they decide to use physical pieces of paper, they will need markers or other coloring tools. A teacher might need a projector or a whiteboard, and then handouts with key concepts and vocabulary of the water cycle. And we have 11 key vocab words, but only 10 fit right here. So we'll go through the first 10. We have evaporation, condensation, precipitation, collection, transpiration, infiltration, water cycle, runoff, sublimation, groundwater, and then the hydraulic cycle. For openings, the teacher will start off by saying, today we'll learn about the water cycle and its key processes, including evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and collection. By the end of the lesson, you will be able to create a concept map to visually represent the water cycle and explain how each part of the cycle is interconnected. Then they would go off of some scaffolding and they would talk about what they learned previously. And the teacher would go on to say, last week we discussed different states of matter, solid, liquid, and gas, and how they change from one to another. Remember how heat can cause water to evaporate or ice to melt? These changes are part of a large process called the water cycle. Understanding the water cycle is essential because it affects everything around us, from the weather we experience daily to the availability of fresh water for drinking, agriculture, and industry. For the instructional input, the beginning of the lesson, the student or the teacher will start by introducing key concepts and detailed explanations. Do you want to go over what the student will do?
Yeah, so first off, the students will listen and engage. During this time, students are listening and paying attention to an explanation of these key concepts and processes. And additionally, the students are also observing and taking in the visual aids such as diagrams and charts that really help emphasize and illustrate each step of the process. Uh,
Awesome. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, additionally, students will take notes. During this segment, students will write down the key terms And additionally, they will note any examples of real life applications mentioned. And additionally, during this portion, they will participate within the interactive demonstrations. Um, During this time, they will be asking questions, observing, and watching the interactive demonstration.
Awesome. So the detailed explanations go over evaporation, condensation, and precipitation and collection. So the teacher will just go over those and explain to the students what those are. And then teachers will use visual aids and demonstrations as diagrams or charts or interactive demonstrations by showing the students what each part means. They can do this by making their own little evaporation systems, like a little jar with plants inside of them, and they will connect concepts to real life. Then they will check for understanding by asking questions like what happened during evaporation? Why do we see clouds form? What forms of precipitation do we experience? And the students would go on to do.
Um, Students will, during this time, be answering questions that the instructor is asking. They will also be engaging within the class discussions when prompted. Additionally, they will try to connect all new knowledge to their prior knowledges that they may have, such as relating new information and processes about states of matter and weather patterns. Um, and then while doing all this, students will be preparing for the guided practice that will take place next during the lesson.
And then lastly, as teachers will do, or what teachers will do is transition into that guided practice with their students. This instructional input, sorry, can you go back up a little bit?
Oh, my bad.
You.
Sorry.
No, you're totally fine. This instructional input provides a clear, structured explanation of the water cycle, supported by visual and real life connections to enhance students' understanding. So that's what they'll be doing during that first part, the beginning part of the lesson. And then as we move on into guided practice, the teacher will introduce the activity, and this could be in multiple different kinds of ways. In here we have said that the teacher will say, now that we understand key components to the water cycle, we are going to create concept maps to visually represent the cycle and how each part is connected. So they would take their paper and they would draw their water cycle. First, the teacher would have to distribute materials, model the process, and guide the group work. And the students will need to do.
First off, the students will form groups, such as small groups of 3 or 4. During this time, they will brainstorm key concepts, individually listing these key concepts and processes related to the water cycle. And during this brainstorm, they will share these ideas with their other group members. Additionally, students will discuss and organize their ideas. Excuse me. And yeah, basically they'll collect all their ideas, discuss them, and then organize them to help discuss the relationship between all of the concepts that they have brought to the table. And then lastly, they will create the concept map. They will begin by creating the map by writing water cycle in the center of a large sheet of paper or on a digital tool. And then working from there, students will add branches from the central node covering each key process. And after that, students will connect the concepts using lines and arrows to create a correlation between related ideas and linking the words and phrases that they have put down on their map itself.
So at this point, students have started creating their concept maps, and the teacher will be able to provide feedback, encourage expansion and refinement, and prepare for their presentation.
During this time, students will add more detail to their concept map, adding additional processes such as transpiration and infiltration. And then lastly, they'll just review and refine that map, leading into seeking feedback.
Can you scroll down just a little bit? Perfect. So, as the teacher prepares for their presentation, they will also be able to monitor and support the students as they are pacing the room and just making sure that all students are remaining on task and understanding what the activity is.
Awesome. And then during this time, students will get ready to prepare their concept map to present and prepare their concept map to the class, assigning roles to each group member, such as who's going to explain which process on the map.
Awesome. Can you keep scrolling down a little bit?
Yeah.
Perfect. So now after the students have presented their concept maps and the teacher has had a time to go throughout all the presentations, they will, or they're getting ready to go into their presentations, will transfer into the presentations and they'll go through and they will explain their water cycles and their concept maps. After the presentations, we'll move into the independent practice. In this stage, the teacher will set the stage by saying, now that you have worked together to create concept maps, it's time for you to apply what you've learned independently. You'll each create your own concept map of the water cycle. And this encourages students to take what they've learned on their own and put it in their own words. They were able to work together in groups, and now it's time for them to work independently. So the teacher will then provide more materials as sheets of paper, crayons, markers, colored pencils, any other item that students may need to draw those concept maps. And the students will, what will the students do?
So after gathering the materials, students will real briefly review the group concept map and the feedback that they were provided using the guided practice to refresh their understanding and refine their maps. And then this will transition them into creating their individual maps where students will draw their own concept map, beginning with the central topic of the water cycle. And then as talked about before, same sort of process, students will add their branches for the main processes and then connect those main processes by linking words using lines or arrows to draw and create connections.
Awesome.
And then
oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say, and then students will add their additional details, expanding upon the main processes. And then lastly, students will highlight using different colors or shapes to highlight the really important connections and processes that stood out to them personally.
Awesome, thank you. So as the students are working on their individual concept maps, the teacher will continue to provide support and they will monitor the students' progression. They will also be able to encourage depth and detail so they can walk around and say, hey, this is really good. How about we add something like this right here to your concept map? Maybe it was something that they were a little confused on and they weren't sure about what to put on their map. They would be able to, teachers will be able to support with that extra detail. As they're also walking the room and checking for understanding and encouraging our students, they will be able to check for that understanding. This is when we will be able to monitor their knowledge, and we will be able to know if they are mastering the work or not. And the students, they will be able to do, go ahead and tell us about that.
During this time, like she had said, students will be checking for their understanding, self-assessing continuously throughout the process, ensuring that all their key concepts and relationships are accurately represented on their own personal map. Additionally, they'll ask any questions, seeking clarification if uncertain about any sort of part of the water cycle. And yeah, just sort of interacting with the teacher and getting clarification and feedback on how to improve their own personal maps.
Awesome, thank you. At this point, the teacher will then wrap up and go through a reflection. They can say something like, let's take the last few minutes to reflect on what you've created, write a short paragraph explaining your concept map to help you understand the water cycle better. After they have finished up their wrap up and their reflections, the teacher will be able to collect and review the work to check for their mastery. Do you want to go ahead and scroll down a little bit? Thank you. And then they will transition into the closing. And at this point, the teacher will say, great job today. Your concept maps show that you have learned what you have learned about the water cycle. We'll continue to build on this knowledge in our next lesson. And this independent practice allows students to consolidate their understanding of the water cycle by creating their own concept maps while the teacher provides support and ensures individual comprehension. Can you go ahead and scroll a little bit more? Perfect. And then we have our closure or our lesson summary. So we'll share our reflections, we'll have our class discussion, we'll recap key concepts and highlight students' work. Then we'll address questions and then preview our next lesson. And then is that it? Or is there anything else below it? Okay, there's a couple more things. We will assign homework. That's completely optional. If the teachers think that students need additional help or additional work, they could assign homework. But if we feel like they're understanding and getting the point, then we don't need to. And then we'll stop with our closing remarks. And the teacher can end by saying, great job today, everyone. You all showed deep understanding of the water cycle. Keep up the good work. And just make sure to constantly be supporting your students and telling them that they did a good job.